This is That Marketing Podcast.
Made by marketers, for marketers.
Welcome to another edition of That Marketing Podcast. We've gone for something with a different flavour this week with the help of our special guest Parry Malm, the co-founder and CEO of Phrasee, the AI-powered copywriting company. This conversation turned out a little bit differently. We ended up talking about a lot of the things that marketers actually often get wrong, offering some interesting sort of correctives and perspectives on things like personalisation, our tendency to over-scrutinize data and results, and we touched on Parry's favourite piece of writing to learn marketing from, which might be somewhat different from your expect. I had a really good time recording this conversation. I hope you have a great time listening to it, and as always, happy marketing.
You spoke at Festival of Marketing in 2018 about the importance of ethics, especially when it comes to applying AI and sort of behavioral data to marketing, especially not using particularly negative emotions to encourage people to buy. Do you think since then we have seen a marked improvement in that, or does marketing still have quite a way to go?
Well, I mean, I think you can't really paint marketing with one brush and say it's either good or bad. Like anything in life, there are good actors and there are bad actors. I think that there's definitely been a real move in the marketing industry in the last couple of years to move away from these sort of dodgy short-termist tactics. You know, these like double glazing tactics that you high pressure people into buying stuff that they probably don't want. But there's still going to be actors who act like that. I think what it's really taught me in the last couple of years is that like we're in a fortunate spot where we can choose who we work with and choose who we don't work with. And by virtue of doing that, we've built up a client roster of brands who are forward thinking, and we reject brands who seem to be a bit more stuck in the past or just focused on different priorities than what we think is important.
Right. I mean, what we do for our audience, or what we encourage our audience to do, is that I suppose it's still the old school method is a lot of split testing. I wanted to get your opinions on some of the things we've come up there. One of the things we found that actually took us by surprise, we did it as a throwaway test, was a lead gen email with a blank subject line actually did really well. Are we the only ones that have ever done that? Or have you come across others that have done that and had a good result from it?
Well, I can't really comment on lead gen emails because our technology isn't built for sort of small scale marketing like that. And what I couldn't really say is like any specific rule sets which are sort of a one size fits all, you know, if you do A, B, and C, it's going to work for you. I mean, if that was possible and if this problem was so simple, then we wouldn't exist as a business. I think I mean, we encourage our customers to test lots and test at scale, and we use the output of those tests as base training data for our various AI models. And what it's shown us is that like language and you know, be it in subject lines or Facebook ads or wherever, is insanely complicated. And while like we as humans all think that we can write the perfect subject line, say, the thing is there's like billions of ways of saying the same thing. The human brain is not set up to explore that entire universe of different linguistic combinations and permutations and ideas and sentiments and words and phrases and punctuation and emoji and so on and so forth. So like I mean, yeah, like split testing is critical, and it's super important to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. But if you're just split testing a bunch of bad stuff, then you're going to find the least bad option. It's really important to work in conjunction with high-powered predictive models, not just sort of split testing on a whim, or else you're just going to be chasing your own tail over and over and over.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned emojis there, and I think in your book, The Language Effect, you've talked about emojis a little bit as well. One of the things we found is that they become less effective over time. They initially massively outperform just a text-only subject line. Do you think all sort of language optimization has that problem, that there's a degree of shiny newness in it, and then people will sort of revert back to what they're more familiar with, or is that not part of what you can test, do you think?
Well, I mean, emojis by themselves aren't good and they aren't bad. They just are. And like an emoji by itself is not going to make or break a subject line. It's not going to make somebody open your stuff. We've run some pretty wide scale data backed research on this topic, and we found that emojis are kind of like Sex Panther cologne from Anchorman, where 60% of the time it works every time, right? Where basically if your subject line is good in the first place, adding a contextually relevant emoji will make it better and it'll amplify it. But if your subject line sucks in the first place, then it will amplify it just in the wrong direction. I think it's really important to think about emojis as amplification tools, but not as a binary, should we use them or should we not? Because that's just not the right question. The right question is, is your subject line good in the first place? Will an emoji make it better?
And so does then the same argument apply to specific personalization with an audience, that people aren't going to respond to a bad subject line with their name in it any more than they respond to a bad one without it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about personalization is like sticking somebody's first name into a subject line, that's not personalization, that's a database match. But I do think that people have like gone down this rabbit hole of personalization for the last, 5 or 10 years, saying that we gotta have the right message to the right person at the right time. And I think that that's like bullshit, basically. So like if personalization worked so well, then why is the single most effective form of advertising on the planet still a homogenous Super Bowl advert, which is not personalized whatsoever? If personalization was right for all marketing, then we would no longer have any mass marketing. But the majority of advertising spent in the world is done on mass marketing, and it's all about finding that message that resonates with the masses, because that's how you really galvanize growth. It also allows you to create like advertising based social experiences. So like, I mean, one example from the late 90s is the Budweiser "What's Up" ad, right? Where that was a generic ad that everybody got. But god damn it, at that time, me and my buddies were all phoning each other up and being like, "What's up? What's up?" And it was a thing. It was like a cultural phenomenon. And you would never get that with personalization because it's not a shared experience. So like again, like, is personalization good or bad? There are some very, very specific use cases in which personalization is good, but they're very specific and very point-based solutions. Broadly speaking, advertising works when it's mass market advertising, and people seem to have lost that point because there's so many technologies out there offering personalization solutions. But just because there's technology there doesn't mean you should use it. And if you can craft a really effective mass marketing message, you'll get much better bang for your buck from doing that than you will from blasting out stuff to Bob and Betty.
Do you guys separate your client base between B2B and B2C? Because our base is predominantly B2B, so I wonder how much you can draw. And it sounds like the answer may be you can't generalize, but how much can you draw distinctions between what works for B2B and B2C? Because either you need to learn, the two schools seem to be, you either copy everything B2C does, or you see it as a completely different silo because they're not trying to target an audience in the same way and they've got a completely different buying cycle.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like that's not something that I think about very much. We sell into businesses, so we're a B2B operator. All of our customers are large, like blue chip B2C brands, like your eBays, your Domino's, your Groupons, brands like that. But we've always like marketed ourselves just in our way. I mean, a lot of people will look in and be like, "Oh, Phrasee's cool. It markets itself like a B2C brand." But I mean, I've got no experience in doing B2C marketing. I'm a career B2B marketer. I just think like most B2B marketing sucks and is boring. And one of my big mantras from day one for Phrasee was just to never be boring. Because like there's no reason why a B2B marketing campaign needs to be super lame and boring. Like just because your product's boring doesn't mean that your marketing has to be boring, right? So we've just always I mean, we don't think of ourselves as like thought leadership. We think of ourselves as like punk rock perspectives, where it's like just because stuff has always been done in a certain way doesn't mean it needs to be done like that. So we've just found what works for us. And like really, I mean, lots of B2B marketing, it just kind of sucks. Like does the world need another like 4-page white paper? It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. So like we've really leaned into it. We've created like an entire content hub, and we're like just piling loads of just useful stuff into it because like that's what works for us. For some brands, I mean, like our methods probably wouldn't work, and there's probably a bunch of experts who would look in our shop and be like, "What the hell are you doing? You're screwing it all up." But I mean, we're not. So, you know.
Yeah, if it works for you, then you crack on, basically. Yeah, sure. Do you think part of the problem with data is that we start thinking about the why something works rather than just going, oh, cool, that works, let's do it?
Yeah, like we find that a fair amount where, especially because we're dealing with, lots of language at scale, there's an intellectual curiosity about why something is happening. But people actually scrutinize data a lot more than they scrutinize humans. Like humans on a daily basis make bizarre choices. Like I mean, like just think about your daily life. I mean, probably, if you think about some of the choices you made in the last week, none of them, or like a bunch of them, won't be rational. They won't make sense, but they're the choices you made, so you can rationalize them retrospectively. When you do stuff on a purely data-based standpoint, one of the challenges, right, is that you then try to like rationalize it with numbers and try to find reasons why something happened. And you're absolutely right. You do like lose sight of, but it works. Like the why matters to a certain point, especially if you're dealing with like stuff that sort of, treads the line of ethical boundaries and whatnot, where like you do need a solid justification as to why you took a certain course of action. But like, I mean, if you're sending out emails to a few prospects or if you're writing a subject line, like even if you do it wrong, no one's gonna die. So like just do something that works.
Yeah, you can get too obsessed with the spacing or who an email comes from and signs off and things, but ultimately it only matters what your audience think of it. Unless you are your audience, which isn't the case for most marketers, then whether you like it or not is completely irrelevant to the creative process, as long as you can justify it with results out the other end.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, I think like people try to sort of project their beliefs on their audience, right? And the problem with that is that your audience, first of all, is not the same as you. Your audience will perceive your brand and your offering in ways that are different from how you aspire for it to be positioned. So like I mean, you can try to force through a message into the market, but the market is going to understand it in their own unique way and so forth. So you sometimes just need to kind of flex with that and not be super rigid and like beholden to this sort of marketing program which you've got written down,
There are bits of marketing that you sort of have to do week in, week out. That list is shrinking as we go on. But how do you find a balance between not throwing out something that works in favor of something new and actually embracing a new thing that can do better? That's something I think especially small marketing teams will probably struggle with.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the sort of example here is the power of email, right? Where for like years and years, I mean, you guys would know this acutely. I mean, every few years somebody is gonna kill email. Like it was blogs in the 2000s, then it was RSS feeds, then it was Facebook, then it was Slack. I mean, next year it'll be something else, right?
Yeah.
And people go like, oh, okay, we got to get a big like Facebook presence. So they'll spend, they'll like hire a social media person who will then build them a Facebook group. Then they'll realize that they need to pay Facebook every time they want to reach that group. And it becomes this sort of like walled garden of skimming off the top where you basically need to pay a Facebook tax, or most egregious is a Google tax, where if you go to your brand's website, you got to pay Google a tax to come up first now, or else your competition bid on it, right? The great thing about email is that it's like first party data. Like once you've built that data, there's nothing stopping you from contacting that data as much as you want. I mean, there's a small marginal cost with an ESP, but it's a marginal cost. It doesn't really touch the sides. So like email is super boring. Like it is probably the most boring of any of the online channels, but it's also the workhorse, the most effective one, and the one that should probably get a lot more love and a lot more investment because, like I said, it's first party data. You're not beholden to these like monopolistic actors in the marketplace who are basically eating your lunch to access your audience.
Are you able to explain sort of how you retain a brand voice through language? If you're using purely data driven insight for your copywriting, it always seems like the argument is, oh, brand voice has to come from a person because people understand it better.
Yeah, so basically the question is basically about, can you like codify brand guidelines, right? If you think about a brand guideline document, it's a set of rules which you need to follow to ensure that the language which you use adheres to your brand's tone of voice. Now, if you have a set of rules that need to be followed, there's an old adage that humans say, and that's rules are made to be broken. So people will break rules. If you have those rules codified in place, a machine is incapable of breaking those rules. Ergo, if you use a machine to generate content, it will not flout rules. It will not justify rules. It will not bend the rules. It will adhere to the rules exactly as you've written them. So actually, to adhere to a brand guideline, you're actually better off using software than leaving it to humans on their own, because humans will always find a way to bend the rules. Rules are made to be broken, right? Whereas machines are not capable of doing that.
And I suppose that comes back around to sort of after the fact justification. You say, oh, I sent this email out, oh, why did you do this? Or because I think our brand voice can evolve in that way, but it might not meet the rules that you've laid out, especially as the marketing team are probably making the rules and applying them.
Most definitely, like there's always a way to like justify actions. You know, this like post-event rationalization is why like suddenly it's okay to drive 230 miles to Durham to see your parents during a fucking lockdown. Pardon my French, right? So like, I mean, humans are so good at like gaslighting, right? Whereas machines are incapable of doing that. So if you want to have like a codified marketing program, a codified marketing voice, the best thing you can do is invest in software to codify that, because then you remove ambiguity, you remove cognitive bias, you remove gut feeling.
Right. I suppose the other objection you like to get there is that machines are going to take all our jobs.
Your question was probably along the lines of, well, should marketers be concerned though if they're investing more time and resource into amping machines up to do various portions of their job? Should humans have an existential concern about whether or not these machines are going to come take their jobs and they'll be stuck on the breadline afterwards? Is that basically what the question was?
Basically, yeah.
So like the way that I'd frame that is like this, you know, if we think back like 20, 25 years so back in the day when people needed to like design something, let's say a brochure, right? They would have an illustrator, a cutting room, they would have like this big graphic area, right? And they would like make this beautiful thing, right? They would do it all by hand. They would then send that off to the printer, who would then put it onto a litho screen. They would print it out, mail it out, become billionaires, right? Now, that involved a lot of human stuff, right? There's a lot of human work. There's a lot of sort of specialist equipment needed. So there's huge capital cost also. But then some guy said, what if we did this on machines instead? That guy invented Photoshop or Corel Draw or whichever, right? So then what that did is it democratized access to high-powered design tools. Now, at the time, there were a bunch of designers going, this program is going to come and take my job. I'm not going to have time to or I'm not going to have a job in the future because these machines will make me irrelevant. And people who thought like that probably did have to retrain and get a new career. But those who didn't think like that, who actually embraced that technology, realized the real power of it. What Photoshop did is it took away all of the mundane parts of graphics and design and so forth, and it allowed people to be creative much more efficiently and effectively. It also democratized access to it. So now there's actually more designers on the planet than there were 25 years ago, directly because of Photoshop. So like what Phrasee is doing is quite similar, right? People were always beholden to copywriters, to this sort of like dark art of copywriting. And copywriters and there are some very, very skilled copywriters out there, like these sort of, corner office situated, like fancy suit wearing Don Draper types, but they are not a dime a dozen. They're very scarce. There's not many of them. So would you want like to have Don Draper spend all of his time writing a subject line for you? Well, no, it doesn't make sense. So what Phrasee does, it democratizes access to those sort of mundane parts of copywriting. So good copywriters can focus on doing good copywriting. And basically, like the copywriters who are fighting it are the ones who just aren't thinking very creatively. They're thinking very short term. Like, this technology is here. It's not going away. One like sort of Luddite with a hammer in the cotton mill is not going to take down the industrial revolution. So the smart ones are actually embracing it, and it's those marketers of the future who can look out beyond this sort of mini existential crisis which they're having right now. They can look beyond that and realize that actually what's happening is a revolution. There's a Photoshop now, but for copywriting, and people who are jumping on board with that are reaping the benefits.
People following up from this podcast, obviously we're gonna point people towards Phrasee, and we're going to point them towards the book that you did, The Language Effect. But in terms of other resources that people can take to start thinking more creatively about copy, where else would you point them for inspiration?
Well, I mean, I'm not a big fan of business experts. I'm not a big fan of like Gary V and people like that. I'd say as soon as somebody calls himself an expert, you should like turn around and run for days. I'm personally a big fan of like learning from the past. Like, I mean, one book that I always recommend reading is Candide by Voltaire, because what it does is it really outlines the difference between scarcity and rarity. And you don't need to read a textbook to like get that, but that's hugely important, because if your product is rare, it doesn't matter. If your product is scarce, then you're on to a real valuable product right there. So like I guess my point is, if you want to be real creative, then you got to get outside of these sort of these like echo chambers. If all you read is like marketers talking about marketing, you're never going to learn anything new. If you're only speaking to people who are doing the same work as you, you're never going to get outside of that echo chamber. It's why I read The Guardian and the Daily Mail. To be honest, I don't agree with either of them, but it's really important to get as many points of view as possible, so then you can synthesize them and make your own opinions up. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, to be honest, but I find the vast majority of like marketing books and business books that I've read, I sort of like know less after reading them than before I pick them up, and that doesn't really instill me with a huge amount of motivation.
I think it's quite freeing that we get so many all these 5 books you must read to be a marketer, and they're sort of dense tomes, but they Candide's not particularly long, is it? I think I've had a look at it before, and it's only 120 odd pages, something like that, is it?
It's after a big earthquake in Portugal. It's a lovely read, but like what's super neat about it is that when the dude went to, I think it was Peru, and discovered that the tribes there had lots and lots of gold, but they didn't care because they didn't value gold. Gold there was not scarce. So it's sort of a neat concept where, like, I mean, if you can really find something that's scarce, then you can make a lot of money from it. If you find something that's rare, then it's basically it's like anthrax is rare, but there's no demand for anthrax, so it's not scarce, so you can't sell anthrax. And I mean anthrax, the disease, not the band. Well, listen, thanks for your time and for having us on.
Thank you very much for doing it, and hopefully I'll speak to you again soon.
Yeah, sounds good, pal. You take care, eh?
Yeah, you too. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of That Marketing Podcast. You clearly have wonderful taste. We hope you found the content useful and enjoyed it. We'd love you to subscribe wherever it is you're listening to us. Maybe leave us a review. If you can think of a topic that you'd like us to cover, or even if you fancy coming on the podcast and sharing your own experience on a particular topic, you can reach us at marketingteam@spotler.co.uk. Thanks once again, and happy marketing.